We are back with another segment of Buy or Sell. I am Serenity Douglas. Joined with me is Ketchum and Anwar, and we're just going to get right into it. I only have 6 questions screenshotted, but whichever ones we get through are the ones we get through. Thank you for the compliments that Ketch asked for. They were highly appreciated. And let's get into it. Buy or
I
sell.
didn't even go through the thread. Were the good compliments good?
The compliments were great. I didn't pick all of them that gave me a compliment, so I'm really sorry because I saw some really good questions. This is a tough week, so it's going to be interesting regardless.
But they have a special place in your heart.
They do. They absolutely. I read all of them.
Okay.
Buy or sell, Catch, you can go first. Sark will be the coach to usher us into the SEC.
God, you come in with the high heat right away.
I had to. The first question, I had to.
Look, I think the safe answer is to say yes. Buy. He's got a 6-year deal. We have historically known this athletic department to be very leery about cutting checks. I mean, they didn't want to fire Shaka Smart because they didn't want to write a big check. They really hesitated with Tom Herman for kind of the same reasons. Steve Sarkeesian's on a 6-year deal and he's in year 1 of that deal. The smart money would say that he makes it to year 3 if we assume that Texas goes into the SEC in 2023, which is a bit of an assumption at this point. They'll start winning some games. They might want to wait till 2025. But I don't also discount the question. Because as I was talking to Anwar about this yesterday, I don't know that this is a football program that wants to go in the SEC with a message problem, with a confidence problem, with a swagger problem. So I think it's really imperative for a lot of the same reasons that they didn't want to move into a new basketball arena with a head coaching question mark looming in the air. I think the same thing kind of exists for the SEC, but for them to cut a $20+ million check, which is what they would have to do to get out of Sarkeesian. I think buy is the smart answer at this point, but I don't discount that the question is being asked for a reason.
It's just a tough one. It's a really good question. Who asked this question, by the way, Serenity?
Phoenix Knight, forever.
It's really good. It's a really good one because there's 2 scenarios, Catch. There is what happens if it happens in 2023, which would be like the earliest, versus 2025, which is obviously would be 4 years from now, right? So, 2023, that sounds, you'd probably instantly, sell on that. That's only 2 years from now, right? But what does it look like 4 years from now when we saw, we've seen the last 2 coaches, 3 years for Charlie, 4 years for Tom. I'll buy it. I'll buy 2023. We're going to split up into 2 parts. 2025. I don't know yet.
It was a tough one. I think.
Put us on the spot, right? From the beginning.
Do you think the coach is getting fired after 9 games? Catch, you go first. When do you believe his job is over with? Catch. We're with Catch in Houston. Catch, go on line 1.
Hey, but you know what? That's real though, because it's like ignoring the reality of 4 and 5 just isn't going to last for very long. And, people talking about rebuild and now it's going to take a few years and it's just a completely different set of messaging that existed a month ago. And I just don't know how people are going to be signing off on that. So anyway, Serenity, move on. Question number 2.
Anwar, buy or sell? Am I really just completely wrong in my thinking that either one of these QBs would be having a very good season with a decent wide receivers corps and a better offensive line? So I'm guessing they're asking, are the QBs' talent skills really down, or is it the offensive line?
Well, I'll buy on that. Those are 2 huge components, right? The only other component is your running back, right? So, but yeah, yes, if you it's easy to say Hudson Card is jittery as a freshman. but it's almost disingenuous not to acknowledge. But one of the reasons he's jittery is because he's getting hit. And so, I mean, I can understand. It's like, well, why do you not like getting slapped, right?
Easy
like,
for us on the sidelines to be like, he needs to stand tall and be brave.
It's like, I mean, I get what's part of the job, but like, yeah, I mean, like, don't flinch. Like, okay, so was that I would be saying, and look, I think, Catch, one of the things you and I talked about a little bit is, I don't think we realized what kind of impact Jordan Whittington's injury was going to have on this team at the time it occurred. In some ways, I think we almost took Jordan Whittington for granted for what he's able to do. But one thing that Jordan was able to do, he's able to make contested catches. I mean, just going up, guy on him, come down with it. Like there was a reliability factor with him as a guy that and now without him, we've seen kind of the struggles that have happened with some of the other receivers and trying to get open. And my Catch, what did you say? The leading receivers from a reception standpoint last week, each one had 2. Did you say 2 guys had 2?
And one of them's not on the team anymore.
So, yeah, I mean, with those 2 components, absolutely. Yeah, I think the quarterbacks would definitely be better. It's not to say these quarterbacks haven't missed throws because they have, because every quarterback does miss them. But you give those them 2 components, I think they're better.
Yeah, no, I'll absolutely buy that, but I won't make excuses for the 2 areas of, I think, both players. I mean, I think, yes, both players would be playing better if there were 2 Xavier Worthies on the team or 3 Jordan Whittingtons, and you had offensive linemen that were winning their battles way more than they're losing them. However, I think with Hudson Card, we can't ignore the fact that, like, he's telling us, like, sometimes it's not what you say, it's what you do. And when we see Hudson Card do, we can see a guy that's not ready. He's just not ready. And when that reveals itself, if you don't understand that and let him bake in the oven a little longer, like if we're using the cake analogy, he needs more time. And the Louisiana game was a bit of fool's gold, right? Because he looks completely comfortable, which means that you don't know from game to game, is this the week that he flinches? And I think it's going to take a little bit more time before he's beyond that. And then when you look at Casey, Casey's issues for me are all about, he's just not seeing the entire field the way that he needs to. He is battling an injury. We shouldn't completely overlook that. But, there are times when it doesn't seem like he's seeing the field where the defenders are. And I just feel like, there's an evolution of his development that's still underway, that still is taking place, whether or not they have better players around them or not. I buy the idea, and it might be that it would be just enough that they'd be good enough to be good this year. But boy, these are still 2 quarterbacks that I think they're not, I don't even know they're on the halfway point of their development curve. And they're each kind of different in what they need to improve on, but those improvements need to occur. And it's a little bit of fool's gold to just chalk it up to if they had better players, because our eyeballs can tell us that it's not completely that.
The one thing to add in there before you go, Serenity, and Catch with that, to both of their defenses, they're both first-year starters, right? So, for both. I mean, there's the guy from OU that comes in as a backup, but he was a 5-star prospect, so that was what he's expected. There weren't that kind of expectation. So there's still some learning that both of these guys have to do.
Well, and Caleb Williams is eventually going to go through what Casey Thompson has gone through, which is eventually teams get film on you and they don't just show up with their hands up in the air and go, I guess we just don't know what we're going to do this week. Like, they will say, okay, this is what he does. Remember, it was right about week 4 when people started posting stats of Casey Thompson's passing tree. And it was like, oh, he throws the ball a lot short and he throws it a lot to the right side of the field. And what if you make him throw left? Like, how does that, like, Caleb Williams is going to go through that. And for Oklahoma, where they probably won't either succeed in the playoffs or get, I think, to the playoffs potentially, is it'll be late in the season when that adjustment comes, and Caleb Williams will have to prove, it's what all young quarterbacks have to do. They have to prove that they can still be good when teams start to take away the things they do best. And Caleb Williams isn't there, but right about the time that Jordan Whittington gets hurt is about the time I think teams started to get a good scouting report on Casey. And those two things combined, I don't even think there is a scouting report on Hudson other than go scare him. I don't know that anything else is needed at this point. Casey's is a bit more complicated, but yeah, I think that you watch before the end of the season's over, Caleb Williams will have a clunker, and it will be because somebody will make him do something he's never done before. And it's all part of the evolution of young quarterbacks.
Okay. Buy or sell, catch. Sark is active in the portal this offseason and brings in at least 8 new players. This kind of is a good follow-up question to what we were just talking about.
I'll say buy, but the math on, look, first of all, the NCAA has not instituted rules yet that would allow Texas to take 25 guys in their recruiting class and then take 8 incoming transfers. That rule does not exist. Texas is counting on legislation being passed before the start of next season that does protect teams from the rosters just falling apart because the current rules aren't constructed to handle as much traffic as the portal has now created. The Longhorns, to get to 25, probably need to lose about 6 players off the current roster, if my math is correct. So to get to 8, we're probably talking about 14 guys leaving the program to get to the ability to take 8 players in the portal, because that would be 33 incoming new players if you took a 25-man class. So these are new rules. Like what we're talking about hasn't even been okayed yet, but Texas is acting, I think, with the number of guys they're taking in recruiting in a way that they believe the rule changes will arrive. Historically, 14 is not a crazy number. Texas has averaged double digits in players leaving the program in every calendar year for pretty much the last 20 years. There have been exceptions when the numbers have been a little smaller, 8 here, a 9 there, but more times than not, Texas has been 10 or easily above. So yeah, I think that when it's all said and done, assuming the legislation gets passed, I think we're going to see a lot of players transferring out of the program. It was one of the things that didn't quite happen when Sark first showed up. It wasn't like new coach, guys left in mass numbers. But I think guys are going to have a better idea of where they stand in the program after a year with Sarkeesian. And guys that have had a hard time getting on the field and don't feel like they're part of Sarkeesian's long-term future are probably going to be looking for an exit out the door. And, one person exiting is another opportunity gained. And that's different. That did not used to be the way college football, and the rules still don't exist to allow for this. But Anwar, in theory, there's a world out there where if you had a ton of guys leave, say a big senior class, and then 15 guys left, you could bring 40 new players in this extreme version of exodus out the program. So it'll really be interesting to see, just after a very disappointing season, just how much roster turnover there is.
I was, as you're talking, Catch, and I'm just like kind of just looking down at some things. I'm on the defensive side of the ball. And when you look, and I feel like Catch, he'll have to do it just based off of what the attrition is going to look like, right? Moro Ajomo is a senior, a junior rather. So I'm sure he comes back. But you never know when it comes to linemen. Keandre Colburn's a senior. Ray Thornton is a senior. DeMarvion Overshone's a junior. We expect him to probably leave. Deshaun Jameson is a junior. He'll have to see if he wants to come back.
Those guys are only juniors though, right? If you don't count last season.
Correct. So then you still got Josh Thompson is a senior. Anthony Cook is a senior. And then you go to the offensive side of the ball. you'll lose a lot of those offensive linemen who are there as well, Catch. So there's just going to be a need to say, like, you've got to find some guys. Like, you just will have to, from a body standpoint, because here's the thing, no matter what you think about this team, Catch, these guys, the staff has said these guys are better than the guys that are on the bench.
Yeah.
So if these are guys that are better than guys on the bench and you're sitting at 4 and 5, then there's two things going to happen, Catch. Not only will they have to get the buys, which I'm going to have to buy on the number, two, they're going to have to hit on it at a lot higher rate than they hit on the guys in the transfer portal this last time.
Well, they won't be able to go all in on one position. I would maintain that this will be a roster that needs portal help at almost every position, other than probably running back and tight end. I mean, I think they'll need a quarterback. I think if Sarkeesian comes out of this year and is like, let's just run it back with the same group of wide receivers, that feels dangerous. We feel like they need a handful of offensive linemen at least. We feel like they need pass rush support and a lot more. They added all the linebackers, but other than Devin Richardson, who's not playing, they're all gone. Well, I guess Ovi gets to come back for another year.
Yeah.
But then in the secondary, you're losing all 6 guys that are your prominent players at this point. So, and then we talked about it in a podcast or a video about a week ago. You lose Cameron Dicker, you might even need to go into the portal. It doesn't sound like the kind of thing you'd want to waste a scholarship on. But unless you want to go non-scholarship walk-on or true freshman from a really small school, you might need someone, or Cameron Dicker could come back for another year. Maybe he just loves him some college. But technically, this is his 4th year. And, if it was me, I'd be thinking about going to get paid. I mean, unless he is short on his degree, he's just staying around. I don't know how Cameron Dicker improves his stock, I guess. So, and there are a number of players, Overshown, Jameson. I mean, they can all come back. But I think the general feeling for a lot of those guys is, hey, yeah, you might not want to count the COVID year, but this is year 4, and I'm a senior. I'm curious to see who walks on senior day. Because a lot of guys would be eligible to.
Yeah.
But every guy may feel different about what year they're in and what they're going to do. But yeah, at the spirit of your question, Serenity, it'll be a disappointment if Texas takes less than 8, because I think the sense is so much roster improvement needs to be made that if you don't have that kind of number to work with,
right,
you might not accomplish what you need to accomplish.
Absolutely. I buy the question. It would just Sark would need to put in a lot of effort in order for that to be done. And we haven't really seen his recruiting efforts yet or where that could go, but it's definitely possible if you're willing to do it. And he just needs to kind of put his pride aside and say, like,
hey, can I ask you a question, Serenity? What's the transfer market like in track? Like, how do other sports view? Because in baseball, guys leave and go to new teams all the time.
Yeah.
And the basketball and football are treated differently. And we've seen the softball team has had a bunch of people that came over from Oregon when Mike White took the job. In your sport, how is transferring viewed in general?
It's kind of like you don't know how good a coach is until you've been with them for 2 years. So if you transfer before the 2-year mark, then it kind of makes the coach look really bad. And it makes the athlete look kind of bad too, because it's like, did you buy into their program or did it just really not work for you? So we always try to give a program 2 years before you want to up and leave. And when it's done, you already know the track and field world is really small. So you already know which coach is going to do what needs to be done and how their workouts go. I know Oregon's workouts. I know A&M's workouts. Like, so before you leave.
Okay.
The culture is a thing, but it's
if you wanted to transfer, is it seen as taboo, or is it like, hey man, it's just part of it? I'm just curious.
It's something that you definitely have to buy into first. It doesn't happen as often in track and field because we're running in circles all of the time. It's kind of, there's so many different factors that go into you doing bad. It could be because you gained weight. It could be because the weight program isn't that well. It could be because you just moved from, like me, from Georgia to Texas. So you need to take a lot of those things into consideration before you would just up and leave.
Okay, didn't know that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm interested to hear Anwar's take on this buy or sell question, just with the most recent events. It says buy or sell. There is, quote unquote, some bright side to Sark calling Moore out and finally telling him to hit the bricks. The players need to see that Sark, although a player's coach, will not put up with that.
I'm interested in Anwar's answer on this too.
Because it's kind of like, is he setting the tone now?
I would say sell. I would say sell on that one.
Okay.
And the reason I would sell on it is because Sarkeesian didn't kick him off the team. Like Joshua Moore left. So there's a difference. If that the incident had occurred on that Wednesday, and then he's like, no, I'm done with you at that point, and then came back to practice the following day and said, listen, this is for you guys, everyone know, if you do this, you're out. You just be just like him, pack your bags. He didn't do that. He had Joshua Moore in a meeting later that evening, and he still went out and played. He served a 1 quarter suspension, was in as soon as the clock struck 12 in the second quarter. And then Moore, it's still upset. And then, on Sunday, he's telling everybody he's leaving. He doesn't show up for practice and he's in the transfer portal. So if Sarkisian had put his foot down and said no, at that point, I would totally buy on the question. But if the guy leaves on his own, I can't necessarily give him credit for that.
100% agree with Anwar. I think the way things played out, it actually made Sarkeesian look weak because the opportunity, as Anwar said, to put the foot down. No offense to Joshua Moore. I don't have a dog in this fight. Like, I don't care ultimately
Right.
who's right and what happened. They got into a big enough back and forth that should have been it for Joshua Moore, because that can't happen. I mean, imagine if it happened in the military. And I know it's not the exact same thing, but imagine if you dressed me down, Serenity. Like, imagine we're doing a live show or something like that, and we have it out in front of everybody. Now, I don't put my foot down, and there aren't legitimate consequences that, like, hey, even if I'm not right, that can't. There's just certain things that can't happen, right? And it doesn't even matter. Like, so I viewed last Wednesday, as a bit of a point of no return. That if you're Sarkeesian, you show up the next day, and the very first thing you say to your players is, anybody else want some of this? Anybody else got something to say? Because that is over. And if it's not, say what you got to say now and get your ass out the building on the way out. And it didn't happen because they needed to win on Saturday. So Sarkeesians need to, and look, I get it, man. I mean, we're talking, he transfers on Monday and we're like, ugh, who's going to play? Like, they're not so deep in talent that Joshua Moore didn't matter. But, boy, he didn't matter enough on Saturday to make a difference in the game. And now you just got an unhappy player that yelled at his coach, quits 2 days after the game, and they didn't throw him out of the team. He just said, I'm out. And I guarantee you nobody showed up on Monday and was like, Sark really showed Joshua Moore, didn't he? I mean, that's just not what happened. So I think that there are fans that want to frame this in a way that makes Sarkeesian look strong. I mean, I don't think it's the biggest thing in the world. They got lots of problems, but this wasn't a show of strength and a show of who's in charge definitively in a way that I think Texas fans, some of them were like, good riddance, but I don't know that the coaching staff was actually saying that yesterday. I mean, if Joshua Moore wanted to come back today, they'd take him back, right?
Oh, I'm sure they would. Absolutely. No.
Just to finish out the season.
Yeah, and by the way, I do believe Catch, if he was kicked off, I think that's something that Sarkeesian comes to the podium on Monday and says it, with his chest out.
Very first thing he says.
Well, he's not on the team.
And got to make an announcement. Joshua Moore is no longer with the Texas football program. He has entered the portal. Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
They pretty much them trying to not say anything said it all, in my opinion. After the little scuffle that they had at practice, I think Joshua Moore was pretty much on his 13th reason, on his last straw. And
he's a cat with 9 lives. It was like on number 8.
Yeah, and then them losing.
Hey, Serenity, no names. No, I'm not asking you to dish out dirt. I'm just curious.
Yeah, you are.
No, I'm not. I really, because boy, I don't want to get in trouble, and I don't want you to get in trouble. But did you, God, because you guys were really successful, so I'm curious. Did you ever see something like face-to-face, like a significant confrontation between head coach of your team and an athlete? That does that happen? Like, I'm just curious, did you see that ever?
It doesn't happen so much with the current coach, which is Coach Flo. He works really, really well with women, mainly because he has a daughter. And I think that he just considers all of us his daughters. So like when we come to practice with our attitudes, he just kind of ignores us. So that's a good thing. But when we had our other coach, which was a woman, it's like when we would come to practice with our attitudes, she would have an attitude back. So that's why we would butt heads. But have I seen something like that? Absolutely. It was me. I can call it out. I have had a back and forth. It's like, oh, I'm done now. I was there. We laugh about it now. But I don't know. I think that sometimes when you're not, as an athlete, when you're not doing well and you really want to, and the coach isn't necessarily giving consideration to why the team isn't necessarily doing well, and you're not listening to me, that language barrier, like the communication wise, that makes tensions go high. And then in terms, it kind of feels like, well, you're messing with my future. You know, you signed a 6-year deal. I'm trying to get a deal. So, and you're not listening to me. So that kind of feels like the tension is just building up. That's why I said he was on his 13th reason before he even stepped into the game. He knew he was entering the transfer portal before he entered the game.
I agree. Like, I think Joshua Moore played that kind of weirdly, but I don't think any of it was an accident. I don't think, you know, Anwar, real quick. It's interesting to hear Serenity kind of talk about a track athlete's situation. We look at football, maybe it's because of the numbers, like the military metaphors come in, like Sark is the general and they're all of, you know, the underlings. And whereas in an individual sport like track, I can see where Serenity feels like she has more domain over herself, her body, how it, you know what I mean? It's a team, but it's not the same thing where it's like, well, if 11 people don't, I'm just curious how, in your hearing Serenity talk, did that impact the way, do you think about a football player responding to a football coach? Because it sounds like the track coach deals with more shit than the football coach does.
Well,
like,
probably because
the track coach has got Serenity bowing up on him.
Correct.
I said
the track
sorry.
coach doesn't have.
I said sorry.
Yes.
The track coach doesn't have a bunch of assistants to kind of buffer out some things too. So, right. I mean, football coach, you've got like many layers, right? You got your strength and conditioning coach, you got your position coach, your coordinator, your head coach. Like, it takes a little bit before you get to the top, you know, in track. How many coaches are in track, Serenity?
I have Coach Ricky, which is just one other coach. And he's my age. Yeah, he's literally my age. So I'm looking at him like, you better get out the way because I have some things to say.
Yeah, so it looks like if you got one bad relationship, it's over, right? You can not like the defensive coordinator, but you can still like Stan Drayton, or you can like someone else, but if you don't like the head coach in track, like, I don't know what you do.
It's just an interesting little contrast of how all those sports operate, and I would imagine it's a little bit like that in all. You know, I hadn't really thought about it. We're always so football driven. I'm glad I asked that question to Serenity. I feel like I've learned something. All right, Serenity. Last question. Hit us with something good.
Okay. I like this question because it's something that I agree with. So I'm going to go ahead and say bye. But Catch, I'll start with you. Buy or sell. Playing nasty and quote unquote dog-like is what Texas has been missing more than anything in the last 7 years, and is the biggest contribution to its failure to play up to the expectations of its players' recruiting rankings. That's a big statement.
I'm going to say sell, but not because I don't agree with the spirit of what's being asked. I think that's part of this. But, this whole thing is complicated. They need more talent. But they have had good recruiting rankings, but they need more talent in certain areas. And then they need to develop it. And then they need to play like dogs. And then there's like, the coaches have to do a good job, right? Like there's just so many elements to this that aren't working at the same time that, playing like a dog, that just sounds cliche to me. Who doesn't say that? Alabama. They don't have to. Okay. They just go out and do their thing. And it's like, well, were you a dog in the fourth quarter? Well, we're at Alabama. We're dogs every quarter. And we don't call it playing like dogs. We call it playing the Alabama way, if you will. And I think that good football programs do that. I think that, people that have to talk about playing like a dog, like you're talking yourself into that. You either have it or you don't. And I think this team's missing so many elements that I don't know that just having an extra element of bravado and nastiness fixes anything other than maybe tricking yourself into thinking that this team's only some junkyard dogs away from being really good. I think that there's so much more involved in it that I agree it's needed, right? Like I think this team has to have a little bit more of the junkyard dog thing in it. And then once they get that thing solved, they got other shit to fix. Sorry.
I would agree. I'll buy on it, Catch. And there's a couple of things I've noticed. So I guess I agree with Serenity. There's a couple of things I've noticed. I don't notice guys getting angry enough. Like, for instance, we look at the last game, we saw Xavier kind of, something happened, I think, with Joshua Moore, and Xavier goes ahead to get the penalty. Fine with that. Roshan Johnson kind of gets into it with someone. Yeah, okay, that you want to see that type of thing. But Catch, it's Serenity disappears.
We'll be all right.
How many times, though, Catch has have you seen like a situation where there's a defender throws down the quarterback, it's kind of lying on him, and you don't see anybody going and saying, get the hell off my quarterback? I remember it was earlier in the year where we saw like Hudson Card getting roughed up against Louisiana, and you were just waiting for someone to say, get the hell off my dude.
How do you fix that?
I mean, man, there's a saying that goes, as the head goes, so goes the body. And that it starts from the top, and you've got to have people who are kind of figure out the way that to get out of that. And then two, I think you got to recruit that way. You got to recruit the guys that are that one. I mean, and it's the thing about what is this? There's always been this criticism about Texas and this country club mentality that they say exists. But you do find the guys who you feel like kind of build that. Now it's interesting that the only hard part about it, Catch, is I felt like this team had some dogs in previous years. I felt like you've seen the Gary Johnson kind of look like a guy that has been dogs. We've seen the DBs, Holton Hill, Chris Boyd. Like you felt like you've had dogs before, Quandre. So you felt like you've seen it. You felt like even to a certain degree last year, whether it was a Sam Ellinger was somewhat of a dog. You felt like there was guys on defense, the Marvion. So it's just
this team has some dogs. They do. But how do you get that to infiltrate an entire program so that it never even has to be mentioned? Everyone is. It feels like the problem you and I are having right now is that we can singularly point to guys that fit the bill. But if you can do that, then it's clearly not enough. It's not, someone asked Sark yesterday in the press conference, who's your a-hole? It was said Golden from the Statesman. It was like, but like you need 60 of those guys.
Correct.
And if you're asking if you have one, then there's a cult. And I kind of agree with you. I wonder, because we haven't seen, look, here's the thing about the thing that would concern me about this is I don't think Sarkeesian's a dog. And that's not who he is. He's a super good dude and super good at his job, right? He's an elite offensive coordinator at the collegiate level, yet to prove it as a head coach. But, you know, when we tell the story of USC football in the first decade of this century, nobody's talking about how Sarkisian was a spiritual leader of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and I'll give you an example. Texas Tech hires Joey McGuire to be their new head football coach. That guy will show up on day one, and he's not an expert on either side of the ball. He's not, you know, no one will ever say he's going to call his own defense or he's going to call an offense. But I guarantee you from a culture standpoint, day one, won't nobody be missing meetings in month 10 under that guy's watch. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody's got a different skill set and different set of strengths. Creating a dog culture, if you will, so that every guy in the program has it. And when the fourth quarter comes, you know your guys aren't flinching. I do think that starts at the top. I don't think you can delegate that. And I think it'll be one of the things that we watch in Steve Sarkisian's era where we wonder, can he make that with his team in his program? You know, our thoughts about what Tom Herman did wasn't that the guys were a bunch of quitters or that they would absolutely fold. It was about execution. It was about getting fine details right to the point where you win games because the smallest margins you do better than the other team. This is a major step backwards this season. That it's not that they're losing close games, they're losing all of the games of significance. They're getting blown out in a couple of games. It's multiple things. And I think that as much as anything else in year two, Sarkisian's got to prove that he can improve this. Because if he can't, well, he won't be here in 2025 and he won't be here in 2024. And then the question will be like, how long is his lifespan? That either has to get fixed and it's got to come from Sarkisian, or what are we doing? Because I will not stop saying this being a problem in November is a big problem. This should have been April stuff. We got guys that don't know to show up to practice on time. Oh, well, you learned that lesson the hard way one time. Like, look, when I played high school football, I had coaches that if I did something wrong once, you didn't do it twice. I can't even wrap my head around being late and missing meetings and showing up late on game day. Like that stuff is so outside of my peripheral because I just can't even allow my mind to be like, that's a thing. Because if you watch NFL Hard Knocks, what happens if you show up 5 minutes early? You're late.
Correct. Absolutely.
If you're on time, you're late.
Yes.
And the best cultures in sports are the ones that create atmospheres of that type of accountability. If practice starts at 11, you don't start thinking about practice at 10:55. It's a buildup, and it's every day. And that Sarkeesian had to have a meeting with his team last week to stress the importance of like showing up on time. It bewilders me. Last week, what was the word that Rod Babers used? He's flabbergasted.
Yes, flabbergasted.
My word this week is I'm bewildered. I'm a little bewildered that I've left flabbergasted and moved into bewildered because I'm confused at how we're here. Not that we are here, how we're here. So, Serenity, I don't see you on video. It's okay. We'll wrap this thing up. We're at the end. Onward, any parting shots?
No, not at all. By the way, I do see Serenity on video.
She's just sideways.
She's sideways for an odd reason. So,
there she is.
Yeah, it was a.
We got weird at the end of the video. That's okay.
It was technical difficulties.
Clearly. By the way, I love the one fern in like the backdrop that you've got going on there.
Thank you.
Where are you? Where like that looks like something that I tried to do back in the beginning. Like, let me just have a painting in the background. You look like you're in a casting call like office. Is there someone who's going to interview you for a screen test for a movie? Now she froze. All right.
Good luck editing this one out, Michael. Jeez.
All right, look, do us a solid, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment in the comment section on any of those buy or sell questions that you want to share feedback with. For myself and Serenity, who is really gone now, and Anwar Richardson, we will do this again tomorrow. You guys take care of each other. Later.